Shrek. We all know him. Arguably one of the most recognizable characters in all of animation. Shrek's journey and adventures have created not only success in crafting lifelong memories for audiences, but also opened the door for the writers of the series to become increasingly lazy as the money poured in and nobody said a word. A money grab. That's a light way to put it. While the story and continuity of the first two movies remains heavily intact, Shrek 3 and Shrek Forever After began to stray far away from reality, even for a fictional piece. Shrek Forever After is not by all means a terrible movie. The animation is good and the villain is funny and chaotic, even though he is dumb as hell. And by using slap patch writing, the main characters seem to have everything go right for them every time. However, it's that lazy writing that has created more questions than answers in regard to the Shrek universe. More specifically, the Shrek universes. You see, Shrek 4 establishes not only a second alternate universe, but also a third one. But what strange realities await for us? What is the purpose of Shrek Forever After? And what is the truth behind our friend, Shrek? We must establish a few things first. Number 1, we establish the Shrek 4 plotline. Number 2, Rumpelstiltskin's plot to overthrow the kingdom, and simultaneously, his plot to scam Shrek. Number 3, the universe created where Lord Farquaad continues his genocide and wages war. Number 4, the war against the Ogre Rebellion and Fiona. Number 5, the tale of Prince Charming and Fairy Godmother. And number 6, I will finish with some other inconsistencies and questions that came about while watching this movie. Why Shrek 4? We begin our tale with the retelling of Fiona's rescue by our main antagonistic prick, Rumpelstiltskin, who I will be calling Rumple from now on, who we learn plots to overtake the kingdom of far away by use of a manipulative secret magical contract with the king and queen, and betraying them. However, Fiona is saved and the contract is ripped up, driving Rumple into madness and forever growing his hatred of ogres, specifically Shrek and Fiona. And from the time of her saving until he meets Shrek at the birthday party, he stews in this hatred over at his carriage in the Crone's Nest. This is the primary timeline of Universe 1, established in the original Shrek universe. Everything else from the series happens as normal, from the point of the King and Queen's contract being ripped up, Shrek and Fiona getting married, Farquaad being eaten, Fairy Godmother and Charming getting defeated in Shrek 2 and 3, and the starting of a big happy family with the triplets born at the end of Shrek 3. Everything happens, and as the months pass, we begin to see Shrek's view on what it means to be an ogre get tainted. What was once his swamp has become a swamp for everyone. He becomes selfish and fed up with the responsibilities of being a parent, of being a good decent person, and he just wants to be an ogre again. The repetitiveness of his days and not being able to do what an ogre should do drives him to his later decisions, wanting to reclaim what he believes is almost a right to him. As his disgruntled look on life continued, Shrek and his family travel to far away to celebrate the kid's first birthday. Knowing it is their first birthday helps establish a timeline. From Fiona's rescue in the tower until now, approximately 3.5 years have passed. Shrek 1 took a span over 1 week. Shrek 2 then took a span over 2 to 3 weeks. Then there were 2 years in between Shrek 2 and Shrek 3. Shrek 3 was over a span of 6 months, and that's based on ogre pregnancy gestation periods. And then when the babies are born at the end of Shrek 3 until the birthday party of Shrek 4 is 1 year. In total, 3.5 years. With a chaotic ensemble ruining Shrek's time at the birthday party, he explodes with anger after letting his gripes of who he is meant to be come pouring out as a roar bellows the hall. Everyone cheers before his fists smash the birthday cake, causing the room to silence. Shrek heads outside, where Fiona follows him and they have a talk. Shrek berates Fiona, saying she will never understand truly what it means to be a real ogre. She says he will never be happy if he doesn't realize he has everything good around him already. After decades of having nobody loving him, acceptance becomes something that he truly fears, which leads him to push away his family and sign the contract with Rumple. Shrek wants to bask in nostalgia, to go back to when things were great, to him. But it only means it becomes worse for everyone else in reality. After their argument, Shrek storms off to where he finds Rumple, and they have a few cocktails, and he signs over a single day of his life to Rumple in order to be a real ogre for a day again. However, the contract is a scam, and with the contract signed, Shrek had to give a day to get a day, that day being the day he was born. Giving away this day allows for Rumple to create the second alternate timeline in the Shrek universe, one where the original Shrek is plucked from this timeline and dropped into the second timeline for a day. And the second baby version of Shrek in Timeline 2 is never born. In this universe, Shrek is never born, which means Fiona is never saved, which means the king and queen are never warned of Fiona being rescued. This then allows for the kingdom to be signed away to Rumple. But this is where things start to go awry. Plot holes begin to develop, and they can't be plugged. Too many questions become unanswered mysteries. So turn the pages to Chapter 2. Rumpelstiltskin and Manifest Destiny. In Shrek's original timeline, Rumple plans to meet with the king and queen to get the rights of the kingdom signed over to him. In doing so, he would end Fiona's curse. However, he plans on betraying the king and queen so when they sign the contract, they dissipate into thin air, and he can begin his dictatorial rule over the kingdom of far, far away. However, this is when a messenger tells them that Fiona was saved, therefore they never sign the contract, which puts Rumple into a spiral where we end up finding him scrounging through the trash when he overhears Shrek's begrudgment at wanting to be an ogre again. This is when Rumple devises his plan to help Shrek out with the magical contract. The contract is of course plot to take away a singular day from Shrek that he would never remember, his birthday. This is the creation of the second timeline or the second universe in this world. But I have to ask, is the first contract that Rumple tries to sign with the king and queen the same one he gets them to sign now in this second timeline? If so, he originally was going to kill them anyways with his magic. Why doesn't Rumple just kill her right then and there, like her parents? Keeping her alive literally is half of why this movie doesn't work. In the second timeline, Rumple knows of his contract that he signs with Shrek, and that Shrek will show up in the future to have his special day. Rumple knows all of this. Why keep the one person around that can end your empire, especially given that you had 30 years to kill her? So there's no true love's first kiss that Shrek can use to break the contract. Weird. And you see, Rumpelstiltskin isn't a dumb person as established by the outside story, but he does a lot of dumb stuff in this story. What do I mean? Well, in the beginning of Shrek 4, the king and queen discuss even going to Rumple to sign the contract. The queen is adamant, saying they can't trust the fairy godmother's plan, and the queen also heard that Rumple was very highly recommended by King Midas. Which is funny because Midas got his gold touch from the Greek god Dionysus, which he's the god of chaos and fun. Even so, the king claims that Rumple is conniving, he's a liar and a scam. So who do we believe? Either fairy godmother is telling the king and queen not to sign the deal with Rumple, and not telling them of the plan that Charming is leaving. So who do we believe? Either fairy godmother is telling the king and queen not to sign a deal with Rumple, and not telling them the plan of Prince Charming leaving like a couple days ago for the Dragon's Keep, or both the king and queen know that Charming is on the way to save her, but they decide to go to Rumple anyways. It was never known until right now in Shrek 4 that the queen knew about Prince Charming even going to rescue Fiona. Think about it, she doesn't recognize him in Shrek 2, but King Harold does. She never even knew Harold was a frog at this point in the movie. So her knowing about the happily ever after curse and deal that the king and the godmother made, she never would have known it existed. So why does she have this distrust for fairy godmother? She's seen as a loved celebrity in Shrek 2. Yeah, she's a capitalist, but she's also a celebrity. Does the queen know that godmother has been plotting for 20 plus years with Harold? So many unanswered questions. So little time. We'll establish the time frame soon, but it just doesn't make sense. There's a 20-year plan to save Fiona, of which only 10 of those years could Prince Charming actually save her due to her curse not being fully formed until she becomes an adult. But still, he's had 20 years of training and magic potions, and then 10 years to start a travel to the Dragon's Keep, which is about a 2-week journey. And another thing, when news broke out that Fiona was saved, who broke the news? Was it the people of Duloc who likely fled from the kingdom once Farquaad had been eaten by dragon? Wouldn't they have all seen Fiona in the church turn into a fucking ogre? They all watched it. They watched it. So when the messenger shows up to tell the king and queen and then another few weeks go by, does anybody bother to tell them the truth? Even the king is shocked that Prince Charming didn't save Fiona, because the king realizes who Charming is, but the queen doesn't know what he looks like. So again, how does the queen distrust the plan of the fairy godmother if she has no idea who Charming even is? So I guess we have to ask, why did the fairy godmother never tell the king and queen that Charming was on the way? Why wait those 20 plus years of planning while you know they would do something so desperate to get their daughter back? They sold their kingdom. Why not tell them that Charming has left and gone to get the princess, then wait to see if he lives or dies before going to Rumple? They could have waited a few extra days. And if the king and queen know Charming is on the way to save Fiona, why go to Rumple? Again, why not just wait? Send some scouts out, see if he saves her. You waited 20 years, why not another week or two? And we know the distance between the Dragon's Keep and the Far Far Away castle based on broomstick flying models in Shrek 4 is roughly 100 miles. This is based on his escape from the castle and then getting to the Dragon's Keep. We look at the shadows and kind of judge it based on time, meaning that he was flying about 50 miles per hour and he went for 2 hours. Probably over bad terrain like the deserts and mountains that Charming had faced. But even still, Charming was pretty fucking slow getting there. The timeline of the original Shrek movies is like this, which is important because this is when the major moments of Shrek 4 happen. Prior to Shrek 1, Farquaad begins his genocidal conquest of his sovereign state of Duloc, a southern nation capital to the kingdom of Far Far Away, with major cities of Duloc and Far Far Away being approximately 700 to 900 miles away. Day 1, Shrek goes to Duloc, and that same day, Lord Farquaad acquires the magic mirror and starts his tournament of knights to go save Princess Fiona. At this time, Charming also starts his travel to the Dragon's Keep, and the king and queen by chance have no idea that Godmother started her 20-year plan into action that the Godmother and King Harold had a deal for. On day 3, Shrek saves Fiona, and it takes them 3 days and 2 nights to get back to Duloc. Day 6, Shrek and Fiona get back to Duloc, Farquaad gets eaten by dragon, and the people of Duloc leave for Far Far Away, which is roughly a 2-week trip. On day 7, Shrek and Fiona return to the swamp and get married and leave for their honeymoon. The people of Duloc take the 2-week trip to Far Far Away, and a messenger travels to tell the king and queen of her rescue, and it takes the messenger 1 week to arrive as they fast travel. Day 14, the king and queen leave for Rumple to save their daughter. This would give that messenger the 1 week fast ride time to tell them that she was saved. Between days 8 and 16 is the honeymoon. The king and queen are told Fiona is saved, the contract with Rumple is stopped, and they head back to Far Far Away and invite Shrek and Fiona. Their honeymoon ends, and they spend a day returning to the swamp where the trumpet fellas show up 1 week after she's been saved. Around day 18, Shrek and Fiona leave for Far Far Away and take the 2-week journey based on the distance showcased in Shrek 2. Assuming the people of Duloc also traveled that, Charming finally shows up to find out that Fiona was already saved and on her honeymoon, so he leaves back to Far Far Away. Then 2 weeks later, around day 30, Shrek and Fiona arrive to see the king and queen, and Charming also gets back this same day on his journey, as it's about 4 weeks in total. 2 weeks there and 2 weeks back. So like a 4-week span is possible for the original timeline of Shrek 1 and 2. So again, if they knew it would take him a few days to get there and back, why would they go to Rumple right away? If the king and godmother had a plan for 20 years about this, why wait a few days after Prince Charming left to go sign the contract? Unless if they just assume he's going to die because everyone else who's attempted to save her has died, but Godmother likely would have given him fire-resistant armor and potions to help him get past the dragon. Plus, Fairy Godmother is shocked that Prince Charming didn't save her. If she plotted the whole thing, how was she surprised that Shrek ended up showing up to save her? Is she not more upset that Charming took 20 fucking times longer on the trip than he should have? It's not that far away. It takes him weeks. Other things about his acquisition of the kingdom, did everyone just accept it? Was it part of the contract when signed that all the people in the armies of Far Far Away would dissolve and his witch army would take over? Or is Rumpel's dark magic just that powerful? And even if the king and queen signed the contract, whether in the new timeline or the original timeline, Prince Charming would still be on his way. And with Shrek's contract being signed, Shrek was never born. But that doesn't mean Lord Farquaad never got the magic mirror in the first place. And this told him about Fiona. So instead, he still would have had the tournament and sent the knights to go save Fiona in the same time frame that Shrek would have saved her, which is contradicted later on. And then the knights would get to her before Charming would have even showed up still. So why would Fiona then in this movie establish that she dips out of the tower by herself in the same time frame that she was waiting there for Shrek? Again, why didn't Rumpel kill Fiona or capture her in any of the time during the second timeline of Shrek 4? He has Dragon captured, we see that, so Rumpel would have been to the Dragon's Keep. He knew about Fiona and everything. He created his own downfall by literally setting up Shrek and Fiona, if you think about it. He never went and captured Fiona, knowing about her, and the dragon, which he likely used the Pied Piper to capture, but it's established that she escaped the tower herself from the dragon. So Rumpel didn't capture it yet, meaning that Fiona, yeah, she did just get tired of waiting. But within those 2 years, Fiona was never saved. She dipped out while managing to become the leader of an ogre rebellion while also the entire time hiding her identity as a human during the day that only Puss in Boots and Rumpelstiltskin know about. But even with that, if the dragon is captured within, let's say, 2 weeks after Rumpel takes over the kingdom, wouldn't Charming be able to save Fiona a lot easier then since there's no dragon? And the same with Farquaad's men. The dragon is now gone. So again, we're trying to figure out when did Fiona really escape. Chapter 3. Lord Farquaad and the Axis vs. Axis Showdown. With the original Shrek timeline leading to the death of Lord Farquaad, the kingdom of Duloc dissolved away and the people leave the land, likely heading to Far Far Away, which is possibly where news came from that Fiona was saved. However, Shrek 4 establishes that new timeline, one that creates a more likelihood of a continuing genocidal onslaught from Lord Farquaad upon the fairy tale creatures. What do I mean by this? Well, Rumpel took a day away from Shrek, his birthday, thus creating a second universal timeline in which Fiona was never rescued from the tower, meaning that the dragon never escaped with Shrek and Donkey, meaning that Farquaad was never killed. In this new timeline, Farquaad would have continued his war on the fairy tale creatures. Would this not include Rumpel and the witches? Knowing his conquest for power, aka wanting to rule a kingdom and rid fairy tale creatures from his quote, perfect world, he would absolutely fucking go after the kingdom of Far Far Away the minute he had heard that the king and queen had died. He would likely have heard it 1 week after it happened, and then sent an army marching over to the castle, so within 3 weeks, Duloc would have a mass storm of troops on the gates. Yeah, you know what I mean. Thus questioning if Rumpel would have been ready for this war. Did he spend his entire life plotting this out? If this were the case, Rumpel is smart, so he would know that Farquaad would attack him and the other fairy tale creatures, meaning that Rumpel would need the dragon immediately to help him defeat the humans, since witches get melted with water. So you'd think that some water guns would literally win the war. Load up some catapults with jugs of water and you're good. That seems weird. But Farquaad's bloodlust for power would absolutely lead to war. And as a side note, in Shrek 1, Farquaad promises Shrek to give back his swamp if he saves Fiona. He also lets Shrek live once he sees that he wins the tournament. So I'm under the assumption that Lord Farquaad has some sort of mediocre respect for ogres instead of the other fairy tale creatures, possibly realizing that he could use the ogres, their size and their strength, as mercenaries or slave warriors at that. Which would then create the possibility that Duloc would team up with the Ogre Rebellion in order to fight against Rumpel. And take into consideration that Shrek never being born, Rumpel would know his entire life that Shrek was never born. To the day that the king and queen would sign their contract with Rumple. So how the fuck did he just not kill Fiona right away and let the whole ogre revolution start in the first place? That just doesn't make sense. And now we have a new timeline that establishes a war between Duloc and Far Far Away, assuming that Rumple does capture the dragon right away. As Shrek signs his contract in the original universe, we head back in time and generate a second timeline in which the king and queen do sign that contract. The king and queen die, and Rumple launches his plot. The witches spread like a plague, and they begin to capture and enslave other fairy tale creatures in Far Far Away. This happens over a span of 2 weeks. Duloc amasses an army led by Farquaad, who uses the magic mirror and his own enslaved magical creature army to attack Far Far Away and Rumpelstiltskin. War wages on over a span of 3 to 8 weeks as the dragon and aerial bombardment from the witches is too much. And along with the rebellious groups that sign contracts with Rumple in order to aid his own ambition of power, Farquaad is likely to be defeated. It is also assumed, as we see Donkey under control of Rumple, instead of being sold to Farquaad like he was in the original Shrek 1. Same thing with the magic mirror, we see it under control of Rumpelstiltskin later on. So we assume that there was a war and that Rumple had won. And again, during the war, but before the dragon is captured, and before anyone else shows up there, Fiona escapes to find the ogres. That's so stupid. 8 weeks later, after Rumple's war with Duloc ends, Fiona leads the ogre rebellion against Rumple. But again, it took a few weeks to defeat Farquaad's army, but almost 3 years, they can't find these fucking ogres. Especially when we see that they are right next to Far Far Away. Like, it's a few hour trip for the witches by broomstick. So how do they not see them? Wouldn't Rumple, right after the contract with the king and queen, originally assigned, immediately surround the Dragon's Keep to make sure Fiona won't escape? Rumple knows in the second universe that the contract he signed with Shrek in Universe 1 is still that true love's first kiss will break the contract and give Shrek his birthday back. Therefore, reinstating Timeline 1 until the point of signing the contract with Rumple in the form of Timeline 3. Also, the secret clause that Donkey and Shrek can decode in like 15 seconds, why do the king and queen not know about that? Do they not figure to decode their contract knowing that there is a secret clause? Especially because of King Midas? If they don't know about this clause, why leave either Shrek or Fiona alive to begin with? Why not kill Fiona in the contract along with her parents? Why not have the contract just get rid of Shrek in a few minutes instead of giving him a half a day to chill out? Which the contract too says he has until the end of the day, which is contradicted later on when Shrek says I have until sunrise. And in Shrek 2 he mentions that it's always midnight that the curse must be broken. And later on in Shrek 4 we see that there is a sunrise in the end. So end of day must mean sunrise the next morning in this universe. Why wouldn't Rumple, knowing exactly where Shrek would be in the future, knowing that if he kisses Fiona as her true love, the entire second timeline that was created and the universe where Rumple is in charge would end? Why wouldn't he have thousands of witches there to get her or to get Shrek the minute that he showed up? He lies to the king and queen and kills them instantly, but he lets Shrek chill out for a few hours before he's captured by a random patrol of witches that show up, and they don't even know who Shrek is. And in the new timeline, Rumple knows Shrek is never born, so wouldn't he technically have his entire life to plan this all out? How do the ogres turn into a chandelier and defeat him in the end? Alternate idea, the magic mirror helps Farquaad in his battle plans as it would know all the strategies Rumple would have in mind. Plus, I'm assuming Farquaad would likely try to form alliances with other evil nations to fight back against the guy that disintegrated a peaceful kingdom. You know, perhaps he teams up with Fairy Godmother and Prince Charming to take over the kingdom, and then he might perhaps create a two-nation state. One with fairy tale creatures, and the other only human. But for the timeline of Shrek 4, we look at it like this. At 10 a.m., Shrek and his family have the birthday party, and after his eruption, Rumple convinces Shrek to sign the contract creating the second timeline. At 11 a.m., Shrek is plucked from Timeline 1 and is placed into the new timeline where he begins his joyous terrorization of the townfolk. At noon, Shrek is captured by the Witch Patrol and he is flown and carted to Far Far Away Kingdom, which is roughly 20 miles from Crone's Nest to the castle. At 1 p.m., Shrek is able to escape from Rumple and steals a broom and flies it out of control at 50 miles per hour to the Dragon's Keep location. And his swamp. And the ogre hideout, which are all somehow within walking distance here. Around 3 p.m. after 2 hours of flying, he gets to the Dragon's Keep, which is 100 miles away. At 5 p.m., after searching for Fiona for a few hours, Shrek and Donkey end up with the Ogre Rebellion, and Fiona arrives back with intel. Where was she originally? I'm assuming she was likely hiding and gathering intel in her human form and returned once the sun was set. Or she got fed intel from a network of scouts who somehow find out that Rumple is leading an attack or a patrol on the ogres that exact night, which is weird because did Rumple plan that attack weeks in advance and then magically turn it to an ambush that night? Seems odd. Did he let Shrek escape back to the ogres where his broom would magically track him and take him to? And then he would be able to hire the Pied Piper to capture Shrek along with the other ogres? Because how would they know there is an attack by Rumple that isn't changed into an ambush until that same night after Shrek has escaped? Plus he knows the bounty hunter to hire anyway, the Pied Piper, saying that magic does soothe the beast, which hints back to our earlier narrative that perhaps he used the Piper in the beginning of the war to secure the dragon. So again, did Rumple plan on having Shrek escape and feeding the fake intel link ahead of time to the ogres? It wouldn't seem likely based on Rumple's reaction to Shrek's escape. He kills one of the witches by melting them. That's weird. So after hearing of the intel, from 6 p.m. until 8 p.m., the ogres hear the attack plan and prepare themselves before they get ambushed and captured. At 9 p.m. after being captured, the ogres arrive back to Far Far Away as the witches fly them by their broom or they're transported magically by Rumple somehow. Between 9 and 10 p.m., Shrek and Fiona split up after their first attempt at a kiss and she gets herself captured. Ugh. Between 10 and 12 p.m., Shrek turns himself in but still finds out Fiona is captured by Rumple through a loophole because she's not completely ogre. And also, the ogres turn themselves into a chandelier and get hung up in the castle. I don't know. By midnight, they win the fight and true love's kiss, yada yada. That's how it should be based on Rumple's time frame. However, we see the sun beginning to rise near the end of the movie just as Shrek begins to fade out of existence. So somehow, Rumple's rules change to sunrise instead of midnight. So essentially, Shrek is given a total of 20 hours from the 10 a.m. signing of the contract with Rumple until a 6 a.m. summer sunrise the next morning. Also meaning that the witches and Rumple were getting fucked up and partying at like 3 a.m. And after True Love's first kiss, Shrek's contract with Rumple is broken. The movie resets back to 10 a.m. the same day with only Rumple and Shrek ever knowing about the contract. This creates the third universe and the third timeline, a timeline where Shrek is born and the events of movies 1, 2, and 3 happen just as they did in the first original timeline. And Shrek 4 events happen as well until that birthday cake scene. That is when the memories of the second timeline rush to Shrek's head and he realizes that he too created a second universe. And only he and Rumple know of this, as they live in the third universal timeline. No contract signed by the king and queen, Shrek kissed Fiona to break her curse, and Shrek now is able to avoid Rumple and have him arrested, as shown in the credits of Shrek 4. Chapter 3. The War Against Ogres and the Rebellion. Following the fall of Duloc and Farquaad after the 8-week war, rebellious groups take arms across Far Far Away, all falling one by one to Rumple's magic and army, either afraid of punishment or death. Yet the ogres fought back under the guidance and leadership of Fiona and other ogres like Brogan. Yet somehow during this entire war of 2 to 3 years, and her being trapped for 20 years in the tower, and being in there since she was about 6 to 8 years old, Rumple was unable to capture Fiona, prepare to fight the ogres, or find out where their hideouts are exactly. Is this because the witches must completely avoid the swamp? Because they die from water instantly? Rumple's inability or lack thereof to take down the ogres is troubling. He is smitten with rage and he hates Shrek so much for ruining his original plans to have the king and queen sign the kingdom over. So that's why when he finds him, he scams him. So right from the beginning, he's had a deep-seated hatred for ogres. If that's the case, why did he not better prep for a fight against the ogres? We know that ogres are strong, independent, and stubborn, but they are likely the only resisting group that's left. Plus, if Rumple defeated Farquaad, Rumple would then gain access to the magic mirror, helping him fight the ogres, which we do see he is under control of in Shrek 4. Fiona escapes roughly the same time frame that Shrek saved her. We see on a wall, etched well over 400 days into it. When did she start making that? And in what time frame was that to when Shrek shows up? To when Charming would have got there? To when Rumple took over? Either way, the time frame of her escaping from the dragon getting captured by Rumple, and the whole rebellion and war against Farquaad and Duloc, it's messed up. Chapter 4. Prince Charming and Fairy Godmother. Rewinding time for a minute here, again, setting the timeline for the deal made between the king and Fairy Godmother is difficult. But let's assume this. Year 0, Harold is turned into a human form from his frog form so that he can marry the princess, Queen Lillian. So he gains control of the kingdom of Far, Far Away. His happily ever after spell is set by Fairy Godmother, who makes a deal with him that her son will marry Fiona in the future so that Charming can become the king. Yet when Fiona is a child, she is cursed around the age of 6 to 8, and then she is sent to the Dragon's Keep. But who cursed her in the first place? If it was Fairy Godmother, why would she do that? Did the king possibly piss off Fairy Godmother so much that she did it to ensure that Prince Charming was the only one strong enough and handsome enough to get her to fall in love with her? Or if it wasn't Fairy Godmother, was it some random witch? Or, my theory is that since Fiona is technically part human and part frog, she mutated into an accursed creature similar to the ogre. Perhaps when she hit puberty at a very young age, since she is part frog and ogre, that kind of brought it out. Now she is one with both traits. Anyways, they have this plan set up for 2 decades, and like a week within Prince Charming leaving, they somehow, the king and queen somehow, go to see Rumple. Weird. Again, the king signifies that Rumple is evil, and the queen says she doesn't trust Godmother. But she doesn't even know about the evil plan until the actions of Shrek 2 happen. And this is all within the queen knowing nothing really. She doesn't even know Harold is part frog at the point when they go to sign the contract with Rumple at the beginning of Shrek 4. We know Fiona's curse, True Love's Kiss, fully embellishes once she becomes an adult at 18. She gets sent to the tower at 8 years old. Charming prepares for 10 years to go get her, and then another 10 years pass where he's training and Fiona turns 28. And then Charming finally sets off to save her. Charming would be able to prepare from when he was a young child until his mid-20s when Fiona would have turned 18. And until the age of 35, for 20 plus years in total, he would have been able to train to save Fiona. So how for 20 years was he never ready? And why did he leave without the godmother going to tell Harold that the plan was going on down in the first place? The fairy godmother is super manipulative and plays the long game with the kingdom. Wouldn't Fairy Godmother constantly monitor the king and queen to make sure that they don't do anything drastic to save the kingdom? Fairy Godmother knows that only true love's first kiss will break that curse. So why can't she just sign a contract with the king to be like, hey, this is the only thing that will break it. If you do anything else, it won't work, ever. Plus, for 20 years of planning by the godmother to save Fiona with Prince Charming, why keep it hidden that he is on the way to save her? The godmother is furious that Fiona was saved by Shrek, so she didn't even know about the contract that they were going to go sign with Rumple, if that makes sense. And when they show up to Rumple in Shrek 4, Harold is not sure of them going there anyways. So did the queen say that they should go originally? She heard he is highly recommended by King Midas, So did Rumple correct him by giving him the gold touch, and then Rumple made King Midas lie to the queen to make him more trustworthy? Midas being the gold touch king, blessed in Greek mythology by Dionysus. Dionysus, a prominent god in ancient Greek mythology, was a deity of wine, fertility, theater, and ecstasy, symbolizing both joyous celebration and unrestrained frenzy, which is very similar to Rumple. They like to party and cause chaos. Creation of Universe 3 and a new timeline. As Shrek and Fiona share what is their true love's first kiss, the contract between Shrek and Rumple is broken, thus shifting everyone to a new alternate universe, the third one. In this third timeline, Shrek loses all memories of Rumple until his birthday cake scene. He goes on his journey to save Fiona and Far, Far Away like normal. All the events of the movies happen as stated before. Fiona's curse is broken with the kiss from Shrek, Duloc is dissolved as was in Shrek 1, and the contract between the king and queen is never signed. The only difference is, now Rumple and Shrek both know of the different timeline created, the second timeline. Why else would they have Rumple in a cage and murder his pet bird? But Fiona didn't know anything about the contract that Shrek and Rumple had signed in the first place in the new third timeline. So since Shrek beat the contract, and it goes back to the birthday time, technically Rumple didn't do anything wrong, since the parallel universe that's created, they get set back to is a time before the contract was even made originally, before Shrek even met Rumple, which is under the assumption that Shrek knows Rumple without ever meeting him technically in the third timeline, because he only meets him in the second one as he signs the contract. Then when the contract's broken, in the third universe when Shrek re-arrives, he's at the birthday scene, which was before he met Rumple in the second timeline. Weird. This also means that Farquaad is back to being dead, Rumple is the homeless creep, and Arthur's back to being king, and Charming dies again. Overall though, it's a fun, silly little movie, and I love the Pied Piper scenes where he gets them all dancing, and Rumple, he's a pretty fun villain. I understand that, even though the 24-hour contract with the sunrise and midnight, that all doesn't make sense, and it's kind of fucking dumb, especially since he just betrays everyone besides Shrek and Fiona. He betrays them a few times, but, you know, he's like, oh, I captured you. Nah. What the fuck is that? It's like, I'm going to betray you, but your key for your lock is right here, right next to you, so don't take it. So let me know your thoughts and conspiracies on Shrek and the Shrek universe. There's so much more written down in my notes here, but I have thought about Shrek far too much right now. Thank you all. Hopefully I will see you all soon with another movie breakdown. Bye.